Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better.
How am I supposed to get all this work done? How am I supposed to pay attention to this when I'm supposed to be in with a patient? How am I supposed to remember what extra modifier to use when it's this insurance and not the other one? There are so many of these questions that we could answer, and I hear them from my physician clients that I work with. I see them all over in physician Facebook groups. This constant question of how am I supposed to, and then fill in the blank. Underlying this is an assumption that we have that someone logically created this system where we should be able to attend to the needs, priorities, and goals of everyone else around us magically, and there's an algorithm to do it, right? If we didn't think that that was true, imagine what would be different, right? If we didn't assume that we were supposed to remember all these administrative things, certainly remember all the clinical things, magically take care of everyone in a way that earns customer service 5 stars, never make mistakes, never inconvenience anyone, and always be the perfect team leader who also keeps her room so tidy when she's working, right? Imagine if we could do all of that. Now, of course, we can't. And if we start listing all of the things that we are supposed to be responsible for, it's very easy for us to see, oh, no, there's no way that we could do all of that, right? There's no way we could do all of that at work, let alone add in whatever we've got going on in our home lives. But how often are we walking around in exasperation, thinking that there must be a way to do it, maybe beating ourselves up because we tend to be good at that. And we get stuck in this loop of just asking over and over again, God, what's wrong with me? How am I supposed to be able to do all of this? We need to stop asking that question. And we need to have a system that we can come back to where we can periodically sit down and look at what's in front of us. Maybe there's something new on the table. Maybe we're just reaching a point of frustration that is bubbling over. We want to be able to sit down and figure out what is important right now and where can I start to set some healthy boundaries. Now, an easy way to think about this, right, is that we all have a backpack on. We're all carrying burdens. And unfortunately, in our line of work, people are constantly adding burdens to our back. Sometimes they're big ones, like we're going to squeeze in extra patients or we're understaffed in this way. Sometimes it's smaller ones, like remembering which garbage can this piece of trash is supposed to go in, or again, this little code that we're supposed to add on over here for this insurance. The telehealth modifier is different from this other one, right? There are a lot of things like that. We also have the invisible layers of things, right? The things that each of us is struggling with. There might be health concerns, right? There might be worries at home about the health or well-being of something else. There might be relationship stresses. There might be chronic pain, right? There are a lot of things that are also invisible to other people. And we have so many stakeholders, right? We as physicians are serving our patients. We are supposed to represent leadership to some extent within the clinic structure, although many of us have little or no actual leadership role. We're supposed to act like leaders And yet we have no autonomy, decision-making authority, any of those kinds of things. Certainly not the salary. We've got our higher structure leadership, we've got insurance companies, and then again, all of the things at home and all of these stakeholders. Imagine that they get to drive the priorities by putting extra things in your bag. When we just assume that we should be able to manage all of this, that we should be able to accommodate everyone else's expectations or goals or values, we are setting ourselves up for failure, and then we're blaming ourselves for it. This is a pattern that happens over and over again. I'd love to hear from you if that's not true for you. And it's certainly very common within employed practice, but this also gets to be a burden if you have left employed practice, if you have started your own clinic, because until you learn how to set reasonable boundaries, even if you're working for yourself, you are still going to run into times where you don't have clear boundaries with patients. People are having unrealistic expectations about what you can and can't do, your time, the value you provide. This is work that we need to come back to. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to take a full day to do, but it's just a process to come back to over and over again. So I was sitting recently with a client and we were talking about some various things that were going on in her life, including, a note from the leader within her organization, some higher up that she's never actually heard of, which was funny to me, who sent a relatively generic message that she was underperforming in their structure-wide goal, right, of having 90% of notes closed within 72 hours. Okay, right? That's a fairly common gripe that we might receive as physicians. And of course, right, it came with it, not only her number, right, but the naughty list, including names of all of her physician colleagues who were also on the naughty list, right? So everybody else who was also below that goal, ranked from top to bottom in terms of, best and worst offenders. We can see right there, implicit in this, right, is trying to use shame in order to create a different outcome. We have to just call it like we see it. But anyhow, we had gotten this email. Interestingly, she was at 82% closure of notes within 72 hours, and the goal is 90%. There was a good friend of hers who was under 10% closure within 90% closure, 90% closure within 72 hours, under 10% closure. A well-respected, beloved physician, right, who was doing good work and communicating with colleagues, but had a very low closure rate within 72 hours. But anyway, so needless to say, my client had gotten this email and she wanted to talk about it, right? So we sat down and talked, and she kept coming back to this other thing that was nagging her, and it had to do with trash cans. Now, any of you who work in a clinic or a hospital, right, you know that you do not have control usually over where the trash cans are or whether they make any sense at all for the actual flow of things that you do. And most of us have also had the experience, especially if you're a woman physician, of being told that you're not doing the right job in terms of putting the correct things in the correct trash, or maybe you're not cleaning up after yourself in a way that we often do not ask male physicians to do, something along this nature. But she kept coming back to this nagging thing of having a restricted garbage can that could only accept things that typically were not actually being produced in their exam room. So biohazard tissue samples, which it's not that common that we produce in primary care. Even if you are doing a lot of skin biopsies, you're usually not creating a lot of biohazard garbage. But that was the garbage, of course, that was close to the exam table, right, where she would do pap smears or anything like that. And where the rest of the trash was supposed to go was, of course, at the other end of the room. This is a very real example of really competing interests. And I raise it as an example to help work through this process because we've got something that is a physician level thing to attend to, right? Closure of notes. There was standard garbage language in there about professionalism, and we're going to listen to you and talk through the obstacles and help you, meet the metric. We can all agree that closing our clinical notes is important, right? Because if we don't, the next person who sees that patient, and we never know if it's going to be a next day issue or it's going to be 3 years from now, right? We need to be able to see what happened, what was the clinical rationale. Of course, the system also needs to bill the insurance in order for money to flow, right? We can agree we don't love it, but we need to close the note in order to have money flowing into the clinic, in order to have clinical continuity and quality of care, right? Again, we don't have to love it, but I think we can all agree that that is a priority. Whether or not this 90% priority within 72 hours is meaningful compared to an 82% closure, we could argue about that. But what piece of garbage goes in the particular garbage that has pictures of what does and doesn't go in this particular garbage? And that one, where very little goes into, being very close to where she is generating garbage, doing her normal clinical work, as opposed to the garbage that she actually needs being on the other side of the room and, not being someone who has permission to make the change. The cognitive drain that goes into a nagging frustration like that will take away brain energy that helps us to be able to set boundaries and priorities and make progress. And again, I just want to highlight this as a very common example because a question might pop up. How am I supposed to, prioritize putting the right garbage in the right place when this is really inconveniently spaced out and also finish my notes? Here's the thing. We aren't really able to or supposed to be able to carry all of the ridiculous things that we are asked to carry. So as we sat back in this example and thought about it, okay, one is a priority that is coming down from top leadership within the medical group. And again, it's an annoying goal and an annoying gap, right? An 8% gap in this closure rate, that is getting her on the naughty list. But reasonable to focus some energy and attention on that because that could be something, right, that could have clinical impact. It certainly affects the finances, which can be an issue, of course, especially in this day and age. And it's something that could lead to legitimate punishment, termination, things like that. Now, how likely that is to occur isn't really, I don't know. I'd say that that's a pretty ridiculous mark to me. But we could agree, right, that this is an external priority that makes some sense, and it makes some sense to attend to that with an appropriate level of concern. And we'll talk about how we sort of came up with that. And that could take more precedence than worrying about what right thing goes into the garbage, because that really isn't something that we should worry about with our degree of licensure. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't been told, censured, put on a naughty list within the clinic for not cleaning up after ourselves. I'm not saying that, but I am saying we get to decide for ourselves what we're going to choose to pay attention to. And sorting things into the right place within the garbage, if somebody was let go for that, that says a lot about the organization. And we get to decide, do we care about an organization that lets go of us because we did not put the right things in the right garbage? That is something I can't fathom. And we will not bend over backwards to continue to care about those many, many, many little nagging things when we've got way more important things, more important to ourselves, more important to our actual employment, more important to the actual flow of, yes, money, but also clinical care that we are going to attend to. But again, until we are able to help ourselves sort through a little bit of this garbage, literal and figurative, we're going to get caught up in this question of, how am I supposed to remember all this? How am I supposed to get all of this done, right? Because we didn't even talk about the inbox. We know that inbox is waiting. So here are some questions that you can start to go through when you find yourself caught up in this energy of, how am I supposed to do all of this? And I invite us to pause, get out some paper, be able to do this in a place where you can have just a little bit of quiet. Feelings come out when we start talking about boundaries. That's normal. It's normal, and it's a reason why we don't like talking about boundaries, where, our hackles get up, right? Because we think about times when we've tried to set boundaries in the past and somebody has been upset with them. That is normal. It is normal to have other people not love your boundaries. It is okay. And, sometimes we're going to have to do some work with ourselves, perhaps with a therapist, perhaps with a therapy tool like EMDR or tapping or something to help work on our physiologic response to other people's emotions. But I just want to normalize that boundaries work involves feelings. It is good work to do, and we're going to need to do it no matter what setting we are in. So again, let's talk through some questions that you can sit down with when you're in that energy of, how am I supposed to? And give yourself a little process here where you can dump out some of the thoughts. You can understand some of the emotions that come up, because this helps you to be able to work through it and get out of that stuck energy. So first thing to write down, what is my load like right now? This is a real question, because when we are sitting and trying to figure out, how on earth am I supposed to do all of this? We need to recognize where we are. If we are struggling personally with our health or an important relationship or the health of somebody who is in our life, or, maybe we're in a situation where you've got two colleagues out on parental leave or something, right? And the burden of expectations is really, really high. We need to write that down. If you've got an infant at home, right? If you've got a sick parent, we need to realize, what is that load like in our lives right now? Because that is going to inform right now what we are going to pay attention to. We think we should just be a blank slate here, but we're not, right? If you've been struggling with any of those things that I've mentioned, or you've gone through a life transition, or a major relationship change, or you're dealing with chronic pain or some unknown diagnosis yourself, right? Your ability to attend to a lot of priorities is going to be low. That's not wrong, but it may be different than other times in your past, right? Maybe when you were going through all the struggle of college and medical school and training, you didn't have those kinds of burdens, right? And your ability to keep up with all the little things that people expect you to do was different. Socially, culturally, education-wise, right? It probably needed to be different because of the way our system is set up. But also, we can't stay in that. So simply put, what is your load like right now? Whatever you want to do to get that out of your head and down onto some paper. You could put some words down, you could draw a picture, but what is the load like right now? Next question. What feels truly important to me right now? This is the second question because, again, we need to see where is our intention and what do we really want it to be on. If I've got an infant at home or somebody sick in my family, or I'm trying for a promotion, or any number of things, right? Maybe I'm new in practice. Maybe I'm building my own practice, right? The things that are going to be important to me are going to be different. We will assume, yeah, I want to provide quality care. I don't want to, I don't want to be yelling all day. We'll assume some generalities, right? But if what is most important to me right now is getting through my workday to get home to my family because of some priority there, then again, our ability to attend to other people's priorities and expectations at work is going to be less. That's okay. I just want you to write it down. We don't have to share this with anybody, right? Next, I want you to write down, what are the external goals, tasks, priorities that other people are putting on me right now? Now that could fill a whole notebook, I'm sure. But I want you to think about the context right now where you're having the feelings of, how am I supposed to do all this? Just dump it out, right? Maybe you've been told 13 new things that are going on in your clinic or your hospital right now, things that people are adding to your plate. There's less support in some ways, and so you're going to have to take on, some other tasks. They're asking you to take on some kind of leadership role, and of course, they're not paying you for it. They're expecting you to bring cupcakes to the party. Whatever it is, write it down. What are those external things? External meaning coming from someplace else. If you've got a lot going on at home, you might write that down for home too, because again, that is just part of your whole life and you are a whole person. So what are the external goals, tasks, priorities that other people are putting on me right now? Question 4, which of those things, if any, feel important to me? So in this example that I was talking about earlier, it feels reasonably important to have a meeting that this leader wants to have because that is the next step, right? So we're going to set up a meeting and my client is going to show up for the meeting. She's going to sit in this space of having an 8% gap, knowing that there are people who have, an 80% gap, right? She's going to sit in this space. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. But it feels important to her to go into a meeting with this senior leader who has asked her to have a conversation so that she can listen, so that she can share as she has been invited to share in order to keep her employment. She doesn't know if there's any threat to her employment. We'll assume probably not. And of course, we can't rule it out, right? Again, we think it's unlikely, but it feels important to attend to a message like this. And so she's going to do it. The garbage thing does not feel important. It feels frustrating. It feels like this is kind of ridiculous. It feels like this isn't my job. This shouldn't be my job. It feels like I wouldn't have designed it this way and it doesn't make any sense why this garbage is here and this garbage is over here and I'm not supposed to rearrange the room. right? It doesn't feel important to her to make sure that her things are going in the right garbage because that's not her role. And if she was prioritizing that and putting it really high and letting that add to her mental drain, right, then she doesn't have the bandwidth to attend to these other priorities. But until we sort of sit and tease these things out, that may not be obvious. And we may be treating all of these external priorities, tasks, goals that others are putting on us as equally important when they are not. Okay, so next question sort of, follows along. Which of these feels unimportant to me? It feels unimportant to her to make sure that the right pieces of garbage are getting in the right place. That's reasonable, right? And it's possible that somebody else has a different take on it and they're coming from a different place. That's fine. But to her, it wasn't really that important. And in her past experience, right, she's seen where people are, being talked to for not putting the right garbage in the right place, right? That is just a part of her experience. Next question. What feels like it's not mine to carry? Here we are. What's not mine to carry is what garbage goes where, right? Or hanging on again to somebody else's expectations that don't feel important to you, that perhaps don't benefit you in any way, that somebody else has, laid at your feet, but it's not really pertinent to your licensure. It's not really pertinent to your employment by the actual group that employs you, right? Because our clinic managers typically do not employ us. Senior leadership at the physician level usually does employ us. Are we going to be written up for putting the wrong garbage in the wrong place? I don't know. I wouldn't put it past some big systems. And again, are we going to have to go through some kind of remediation process in order for the right garbage to be in the right place? Is that the level that we're operating on? Because if that's the level that we're operating on, this organization is working in just a crazy, crazy, crazy way. Again, there might be some out there, but we get to choose. Are we going to participate in that or not? Question number 7. How do I want to show up if others don't agree with my priorities? So what we decided was, again, that we're going to set up the meeting with this guy who probably does not practice anymore and probably hasn't for a number of years, probably hasn't since before the pandemic. And we are going to talk through, the situation of trying to meet the metric of 90% closure within 72 hours. And we talked through some language around that. But we also came back to this issue of the garbage because, again, it just felt like this kept popping up. And what we decided for her was that she might try just leaving the garbage. She works in a system where there are medical assistants. There is not a consistent medical assistant. That is true, and that is common, right? But there is someone who is supposed to come and clean the room, get the room ready for the next patient. We decided as well that if someone comes to her and complains, we notice, Dr. So-and-so, that you're not putting the garbage in the right place or you're not cleaning up after yourself, that the language we're going to come back with is, well, my senior physician leadership has made me aware that the organization priority is for me to close the note. Between patient care with the patients in the room, closing the notes and dealing with the inbox, which we all know we have less and less help with, those are my priorities. And because of that, I'm going to need to let the medical assistants help me the way that they help other physicians to make sure that the garbage goes in the right place. We talked through this, and it can seem a little bit silly, but again, This is us practicing showing someone else the load that we're carrying, being clear about what we are and are not going to do, and doing this in a way that is not whining, it's not complaining, it's making clear what the priorities and expectations are that we are going to respond to and which ones we are not. There's a big issue, in the last, I don't even know how many years now, of, well, it's hard to hire medical assistants. Well, it's really hard to get help. I get it. You're right. It is hard to do that. And we also need to not let the priority of the clinic or the hospital system be that we have optimal jobs for medical assistants that don't involve helping to clean up in between patients, and we have doctors over here who are drowning and are taking on responsibilities that are so not what we need them to be doing, right? I don't want to say beneath them. I want to say it's not what we need them to be doing. All of us know how to clean a toilet, right? If you have your own practice, and especially if you're just starting, you might be cleaning your own toilet and doing your own repairs, right? That is a different circumstance. That's okay. What we are talking about right now, though, is in a system where we are trying to protect, I don't even know what, the attractiveness of this job that's so hard to hire in for, apparently, because probably people get treated like crap. And we're doing that at the cost of burning out the physicians who are the ones who are 100% needed in order to provide the care, right? If we do not have physicians, I'm leaving the APP argument out of this for right now. If we do not have physicians providing the care, there is no clinic or hospital system, right? We have to have this. We don't always have the help and support over here, but in a system where, at least in name, we've got the support, we need to understand what the priorities need to be. The last question, how am I going to have my own back? This is an important one to ask, because when we are talking about negotiating through priorities, boundaries, right, being able to practice saying that clear language, we are going to get pushback. We can anticipate that. It's so much better to anticipate it a little bit and have a response to it that supports you, that makes sense, and where you might have some feelings, so that you're just prepared. Again, that can feel silly for people to do, but if you have struggled with setting and maintaining boundaries, this is the work to be doing, of figuring out how will I respond when someone else is predictably upset with the boundaries that I've set or the priorities that I've said that I will and won't respond to. And how will I choose to support myself? Will I choose to have a difficult conversation, take myself, into the bathroom and have some deep breathing? Will I practice saying to myself over and over again, this is very reasonable. I would tell my friend the same thing, and I'm supporting myself in speaking up for myself here. Will I reach out to my coach, my therapist, right? Someone else who can listen to me and understand how stressful this is, right? There are a number of ways that we can support ourselves, but we will let go of the beating ourselves up, the holding on to this perfectionism and these unrealistic expectations. We are going to let that go. We are going to have our own back. So I want you to write down, how am I going to have my own back when someone else is predictably not loving the priorities and boundaries that I've set? So I'm going to read through the questions again without diving into them. Wish me luck. Just so that you have them and you can write them down. They will also be in the show notes so that you can come back to it, because this is a practice that you're going to want to come back to every time you find yourself asking, how am I supposed to do this? So question 1, what is my load like right now? Question 2, what feels truly important to me right now? Number 3, what are the external goals, tasks, or priorities that others are putting on me right now? Again, we can think work and home and any place else that makes sense to you. Number 4, which of these, if any, feel important to me? Number 5, which of these feels really unimportant to me? Number 6, what feels like it's not mine to carry? Number 7, how do I want to show up with others if others don't agree with my priorities? And number 8, how will I have my own back? So again, I want you to keep track of these questions. I want you to jot them down somewhere. You might do this process once a month and just get into the habit of figuring out over and over, where are these priorities and boundaries coming from? What do I need to do to take care of myself? How do I want to, be looking at all of the things that are on me regularly and deciding what things I'm going to let go of, what things I might delegate more, what conversations might I anticipate and choose to support myself in better, right? This is excellent work to be doing. This is work that I do all the time with physician clients. And it's just so helpful for us deciding to let go of carrying everyone else's priorities on our backs, right? We can't do it. It's not reasonable to expect that we should be able to do it. But so often we're carrying this thought of like, oh, there must be a way for me to do this. There's not. We know that medicine is going to continue to change. And it doesn't matter if you are employed, if you work in a clinic or a hospital. It doesn't matter if you have your own practice, right? Things are going to continue to evolve, and you are constantly going to need to be able to understand where your priorities and boundaries are. Again, this is just necessary work and would have been so amazing, right? If we could have learned this in medical school or learned this during residency training. I think we could all point to examples where someone sort of maybe tried to tell us just a teensy bit. But on the other hand, as medical students and residents and fellows, we also needed to be the people with the least amount of boundaries because of what we were being asked to do. So makes sense. It's not great. This is us doing the work now to recover from having gone through this and have our own back. We can expect that the expectations that we receive from patients, from staff, from our leadership, perhaps from our families or our close relationships, people are going to continue to pile priorities on you, and you are going to need to come back to this process. But imagine if you have a simple practice that you can sit down on a semi-regular basis and be able to unload some of what you're carrying, to be able to figure out, like, what am I putting in my pack right now? What am I going to leave by the side of the road? What am I going to give to somebody else to carry, right? That becomes the work, and it is good work to do. It helps us to be in tune with how we're feeling. It helps us to be in tune with what's important to us. It helps us to be able to do the work, again, of reclaiming ownership and autonomy over ourselves, even if we're still employed. And I'd love for you to understand, right, if you are still employed, that again, whether you're employed or you're doing your own thing within medicine, this work is still needed. It's still incredibly valuable, and we can do it at any point, right? If you are employed and you're going to stay employed, if you are employed and you're considering starting your own thing or moving someplace else, right, to, get out of here for whatever reason and be somewhere else, even if you were deciding to leave in medicine, even if you are deciding to open your own practice and be the boss, right, and have control, you are still going to need to be able to do this boundary work, because I promise you that other people will continue to put their priorities and expectations on you. This is good work to do. All right, my friends. This ended up being longer than I expected, but I think some really juicy pieces here for us to continue to work through. If that stirred something in you and you've been realizing, I am needing some help here. I don't know how to figure this out for myself. I want you to go to the link in the show notes and set up a time for us to talk. We can have a quick conversation and talk about what it looks like to start working with me as a coach, what it looks like to start getting that support so that you have accountability that teaches you to be more in tune with yourself, that teaches you to be accountable to yourself for your own goals and not for the goals of other people, not for making everybody else happy, but trying to figure out, how do I want to live my life right now? So again, if you have been thinking about it, if you are ready, go to the show notes. You can find the link right there. You can also send me a message, MEGAN at healthierforgood.com. I'd love to chat and talk about how we can help your life be better now. All right, my friends, that is our show for this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. Until next time, take care.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.